If you bought an email list, you could not use it with Constant Contact. We do not recommend buying data for cold emailing. I have never bought anything from spam email, and I don't know anybody else that has. Not that they would admit to, and that might be because the only thing that they're buying from a spam email is Viagra. So unless you're in that business, like, I would say don't do it. It's much better to focus that funding on a campaign that will help you grow your list. Like, that's something that Jorgen mentioned earlier, and there's so many great ways that you can do that. I mean, it might be worth taking a chunk of that money. You wouldn't even have to use all of it, but taking a chunk of that money and running a good and relevant competition, say, that you would require people to enter with their email address to actually build your contact list, but make it something where it would be relevant to the kinds of people that you want as your customers. So, for example, if you did a competition to grow your mailing list for an iPad mini, you're going to get all sorts of people going for that. However, if you run a cookery school and you did a prize that was, a free week's cookery course, a residential cookery course, then you're going to get people who are interested in a residential cookery course, and that applies for business to business as well. Don't think that buying prizes like tech goods aren't going to weed out the people that you don't want on that list. So I would say spend the money on building organically, and you could probably actually you could invest in a prize that's £100 worth. You'd still have £400 left to spend, and then you could do some other advertising as part of that. And if you are going to display was the alternative you mentioned, wasn't it? If you are going to do display, be very, very careful. Make sure it's very targeted. I'm not an expert in that area, but I know that you can waste a lot.
I would, completely discourage buying a list, because that never works. And 10 people have already bought that list and send emails to all those people. So I think those emails probably be inactive by now anyway. For £500, you ought to invest in some really good content, which you can then spread out in different places. So that's a long-term effort. Create some really strong content, get 5 blog posts written, do a video or something that's going to attract visitors coming back to you over time. But if you want to invest in ads, like Tamsin says, be very, very careful with AdWords in particular, because it's so easy to waste money on there. Try Facebook ads instead. I think we find that there's a lot better value for money. So, and it's not as complicated as AdWords either. So, but whatever you do not buy lists.
Okay, so beyond that first idea of run a competition, there's actually I have a slide deck that I present sometimes that is called 60 ways to grow your list, and there's a whole lot more than 60, but there's a few really simple things. Just be aware that it's not going to, you're not going to end up with hundreds of thousands overnight. Probably some of the quickest ways to actually grow a list are to do things like running competitions and that sort of stuff. But what you want to look at is steady list growth. And I think it's really a change in mentality. So what you want to think about is every time you come into contact with someone who's a potential customer for you, whether you are online, offline, in person, it doesn't matter. Think about how can you get that person onto your mailing list, right? Even before you think about selling to them. Because if you try to sell to people and they say no, you then most likely have lost the opportunity to get them as a sale. Whereas if you can get them onto your mailing list, you have forever and a day. As long as you keep sending them really useful content, like Jorgen was saying earlier, you've got a long time to actually work on selling to them. So think about where all those touch points are. Something as simple as in your normal Outlook or Gmail signature, have a link to sign up for your newsletter there. Tell people what's in it for them, or let them know about the lead generation tool, the lead magnet that Jorgen mentioned earlier as well. So that could be something as simple as a money off voucher for that person's first purchase, or it could be a guide, a white paper, or a checklist. anything like that. Events are a great way to grow your list as well. So think about, is there an event that you could be part of that a lot of your potential prospects are likely to be at, where you can use that as an opportunity to grow your list? Or is it a good idea for you to host an event yourself? You don't have to do something quite as big as the the social media conference that Jürgen runs. Even something smaller on a more local basis, or a more targeted basis, will still get you a handful of people who are potentially good customers for you. So what I'd like you to do, if you want to grow your mailing list, is look at where do you come into contact with people, and think about, for every single one of those points, is it possible to turn that into somewhere that you can get them on your mailing list? So as an example, if you have a Twitter profile, you could put a link to your sign up page in your Twitter bio. You can do that if you want to. Most people fill their Twitter bios with stuff that has no interest to anyone anyway. So, put the pertinent bits in there, add something fun, and then have a, get to know me by registering for blah 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 blah, or get my free tips at, or whatever. So yeah, I would say just look at where you are and think of how you can turn every single one of those opportunities into a way to.
Tamsin's already covered off most things here, but I would also consider, if you have a site or a blog, putting a pop-up on there. So pop-ups can be a little bit annoying, but if you use a pop-up that comes up after 30 seconds, or when someone scrolls all the way to the bottom of a page, and it doesn't cover the whole page, so it just comes up in the bottom right-hand corner, for instance, and just says, like this content, sign up here for more, or it offers the lead magnets. That's a really powerful way of doing that, because people are already consuming your content, so they probably want to stay on top of new things that you're putting out. And also, as Tamsin mentioned about prospects and customers, how can you get them onto your email list? Well, you could potentially ask them and just say, do you mind if we put you on your newsletter, and so on. And also on social media, you'll have a lot of LinkedIn connections, perhaps, or Twitter, for instance. You could ask them, do you mind if we put you on our newsletter? And on Twitter, there is a Twitter card, so it's a Twitter advert, which is not very expensive, but a Twitter card that basically allows you to sign up to a newsletter just by one click. So it'll say, it'll say your email address that you sign up. But the person looking at the ad, their email address will come out auto-populated, and all they have to do is to click yes, please, and that puts them on the mailing list. So that's a really quick way of getting more subscribers from social media.
The best time to send does depend on the industry, it depends on the audience, and it depends on the product or service that you're selling. So, for example, there's no point a pizza delivery service sending emails at breakfast time, right? You don't want to think about that at least until mid-afternoon, unless they've got a special on for lunch times, in which case you send it like just before lunch when people are thinking about doing their lunch run from the office. In terms of sending at the weekends and with the B2B audience in particular, I would say, and finding out for your specific audience as well, whatever industry you're in, it makes sense to test it. It makes sense to chunk up your mailing list into 2 or 3 different blocks and to do what's called a split test. So a split test just simply means that you are testing something by splitting out the people that it's sent to, but the idea is that you only change one thing at a time. You only change one variable at a time. So if you're split testing best times to send, then don't change anything else in the email, like not the subject line, not the send from name, nothing else apart from the time that you send. If on the other hand you were, like going back to an earlier question, if you're split testing subject lines, then that should be the only bit you should change, and you should send both those splits at at the same time. So I would say that there's a number of different components in there, but not just time of day, it's also day of the week. And so what you would want to do, if say you're trying to work out whether a Saturday, because you mentioned at the weekend, is a good time, is a good time for you to send, it would be a good idea to say do like a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Saturday, all at 10 a.m. Pick whichever day works best, and then to test several different times on that day. So maybe 3 different times on that day. But most of the time, I think people's gut feel on when would be a good time to send, if they're actually thinking about it in advance, tends to be right, but it's a really good idea to test and make sure. I say their gut feel on when they're thinking about it in advance, because what normally happens is people get to the end of the week, they go, oh no, I haven't sent my email out that I wanted to send this week, and they send it at 4:30 on a Friday, which is probably a good time for not very many people. So do try and plan it in advance.
I can't hear. But yeah, so did I just mute?
No, you're
my speaker? Right, yes, I would say, yeah, absolutely test and look at different days and all those things. But the irony is that we've tested a lot of different days and times in a day, and whenever we run tests, it comes up with new results. So it's very, very difficult to pin this down. And I think if you look at in the UK, B2B marketers, previously I read something about 2 p.m. on a Tuesday is the optimal time to send. But that, of course, means that everyone is sending their newsletter at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. So there's also some reverse psychology involved there. So if everyone is sending on Tuesdays, then perhaps you should send it on Friday or on Sunday, because there's less competition in the inboxes. So yeah, it comes down to testing and a little bit of luck sometimes as well, I think.
Marketing.
Kind of covered this already, but I think emails should be sent on a regular basis, but not as regular as tweets, for instance. So regular emails ideally should be more of a roundup, so a weekly or a monthly roundup of what's going on with your business, with your product, services, and content, and so on. Whereas social media is more live updates. But every time you send an email campaign, you should also share it into social media, because people on social media, they might want a roundup because they haven't got time to look at all your tweets, so they'll happily look at just the one update. You can do basically the web version, browser version of your newsletter, just tweet that or put it on LinkedIn. We tend to put it everywhere we can. And you can also get stats, so you can see how people reach your newsletter via, not via inboxes, but via the internet, I guess. So that's how it should play together. And yeah, I mean, there are loads of ways of cross-pollinating as well. So on the newsletter, you should mention we have social media channels. Have a look at these. And then, of course, on social media, you should say we have a newsletter. Have a look at this. Because some people prefer to consume email, others prefer social media. But at the end of the day, it's you talking, and it's hopefully similar type of messages that are coming across.
Yeah, I think Jürgen's right. There's so many different ways that you can connect the two. So, list growth, actually building your social following by telling your email subscribers what's happening. I've seen people do, like a Twitter roundup, like their most favorited items that week, so they're actually using it to figure out what content should work. You can use tools like Instagram to actually generate visual content for you to share, and even video and things that you can be sharing on your email as well. And then one of my favorites that I think is really, really effective is using a tool called Click to Tweet. So that's clicktotweet.com. It's a free service. And what you can do is you can have, sometimes you might see when you're reading a blog article, it'll have a little bit of text, and then it will pull out a specific fact or a quote, and it will say underneath, click here to tweet this. Well, you can do that with your emails as well. And Click to tweet is a tool that will allow you to do that. So what you're doing there is you're making it super, super easy for people to spread what you're saying in your emails through your social channels, and just not enough people do that. It takes only a couple of minutes to actually set up each one. But if you only had one of those in every newsletter that you sent out, that was just something that they could click to tweet, it's because it's a really simple action that people can take. And